The gale rose from the black horizon like a living thing, hurling knives of rain against the rocky coast of Galicia. Waves smashed the jagged cliffs until the very stones trembled. Through that chaos a lone carriage labored, its lanterns swinging wildly, the horses lathered and frantic. Inside, Duke Alaric of Montreval gripped the velvet seat with pale knuckles, every jolt a reminder of the ocean's fury. The Duke was no stranger to storms of politics or passion, but this tempest threatened to unmake the earth itself. His entourage had turned back hours ago, leaving him with only a terrified driver and the roar of the Atlantic. When the carriage wheel snapped near a spit of granite, the horses screamed and reared, and Alaric was pitched into the mud. Lightning split the sky, revealing a tower of stone rising from the cliff's edge, a lighthouse, its great lens still burning defiantly through sheets of rain. He staggered toward it, cloak whipping like a wounded sail. Salt spray stung his eyes, and each step felt like a battle. The heavy oak door resisted until a small, determined figure pulled it open. A sudden rush of warm air and firelight wrapped him as tightly as the storm had moments before. She was barely 20, her dark hair damp but unbowed, eyes reflecting the flame of the lantern she held. "Get inside, my lord," she shouted over the wind, her voice a clear chime in the chaos. "The sea will take you if you wait." Alaric crossed the threshold, chest heaving. "You know who I am?" he asked, breathless, unsure whether to reveal his station or guard it. "I know only that you are drowning," she replied, bolting the door with a force that belied her slender frame. "Names can wait until morning." The tower smelled of salt and smoke. Behind her, a spiral stair climbed toward the great lens, its light sweeping across the storm-tossed sea. She set the lantern aside and pushed damp strands of hair from her brow, studying him with eyes that held neither fear nor flattery. He had met queens and courtesans who trembled at the sight of his crest, yet this young woman faced him with the calm of stone. "My father is ill," she explained, voice quieter now. "I tend the light tonight. I am Isella Varela." "And you," she tilted her head, taking in his fine coat, the jeweled clasp at his throat, "are far from where men dress like that." Alaric removed his soaked gloves, each movement slow, deliberate, as if to delay the strange intimacy of her gaze. A duke, stranded in a peasant's lighthouse. Beyond the walls, the ocean thundered its relentless hymn, but inside, the silence between them grew louder still. He followed her up the winding stair, the narrow steps forcing closeness. Her skirt brushed his knee, carrying the scent of heather and smoke. At the top, the glass chamber swirled with light, its great lamp turning like a captured star. Through the windows the Atlantic raged, silver fangs flashing with every bolt of lightning. Isella checked the mechanisms with practiced hands. "The sea has a cruel heart," she said. "But it listens when the light speaks." She glanced at him, a quick, assessing look. "Do you know anything of storms, Duke?" He almost asked how she knew his title, then realized the signet on his glove had betrayed him. "Only the ones men make," he answered. "And they are often worse." A faint smile touched her lips, and for a moment the tower seemed to breathe with them. He watched her move around the lamp, sure-footed despite the slick stones, the flame painting her skin in molten hues. She spoke of the sea as though it were a companion, sometimes a lover, sometimes a thief. He told her nothing of the court he'd left behind, the fiancé chosen for him by treaty, the endless banquets where every smile hid a blade. When lightning struck a distant mast, she caught his arm, eyes wide. "A ship's in peril," she whispered. Together they worked the signal flags through the storm, her fingers deft as she guided him. Rain lashed the glass, and the wind howled like a beast denied. Hours passed in a blur of shouting and light until at last the ship found safer water. Relief softened her shoulders, and she let out a breath that trembled. Later, by the hearth below, they dried their clothes. The fire crackled, throwing golden light across the stone walls. Her hair, loosened from its braid, framed her face like midnight silk. Alaric found himself tracing the lines of her profile in the flickering glow, the delicate strength of her jaw, the quiet courage in her eyes. "You stare as if you've never seen a woman," she teased softly, a hint of daring beneath the words. "I have," he admitted, voice low. "But never one carved of wind and flame." Color rose in her cheeks, though she did not look away. Outside, the storm's roar deepened, a dark symphony. Inside, a different tempest gathered, one neither dared name. When dawn came, it brought no peace. The storm raged on, and the road beyond the cliffs remained impassable. Alaric offered coin for a messenger to fetch another carriage, but Isella only shook her head. No road will stand until the sea bows. You are a guest until then, whether you wish it or not. Guest. The word struck like a spark on dry tinder. They spent the morning tending the light, climbing and descending the narrow stair until the rhythm of their steps matched the pulse of the ocean. He watched the way she balanced on the gallery, fearless against the gusts, her eyes fixed on the horizon as though she alone commanded the tides. She watched him too, though never for long, as if afraid to let her curiosity betray her heart. By evening the storm eased to a ceaseless rain. They shared a meal of fish and dark bread while the fire snapped and hissed. She told him of nights when her father sailed for supplies and she kept the lamp burning alone, how the sea whispered to her of distant lands and unclaimed dreams. He listened, each word weaving a spell stronger than the wine warming his blood. At last she asked, "Will you return to your castle when the sun rises?" "My castle, my duties, my intended," he said, the final word tasting bitter. "All await me, yes." Her gaze did not falter, though a shadow crossed it. Then this night is only a pause in the world's turning. He wanted to protest, to tell her that the world itself felt remade within these stone walls, that the storm had stripped him of everything but truth. Instead he reached across the small table, fingers brushing hers. She did not pull away. The touch was a quiet confession, a bridge of heat between two lives that could never join. The wind moaned through the shutters, a low and ancient song. Alaric thought of the endless ceremonies awaiting him, the cold weight of a crown he did not yet wear. He thought of Isella's laughter when the gulls had nearly stolen their bread, the fierce light in her eyes when they saved the doomed ship. He thought of the sea itself, merciless and free. "You have given me shelter," he said at last, voice rough. "And more than shelter." Her hand turned beneath his, fingers intertwining. "The storm brought you," she murmured. "Perhaps it will take you back. But for this night, you are here." The lamp above them continued its slow, eternal rotation, casting long arcs of light across their faces. Beyond the walls, the ocean whispered and raged, but inside the lighthouse time itself seemed to hesitate, holding them in a moment as fragile and unstoppable as the tide. By dawn the tempest had not relented. The sea boiled beneath a pewter sky, every crash against the cliff sending tremors up through the tower's stone bones. Alaric stood at the narrow window, watching the horizon writhe, the glass blurred with salt and rain. His instincts as a duke pressed him to escape, to summon order, to command the storm itself to yield. But here, far from court, his authority meant nothing. When he offered coin for a messenger to fetch a carriage, Isella only smiled faintly, the curve of her lips as calm as a priestess at prayer. "No road will stand until the sea bows," she said, shaking her head. "You are a guest until then, whether you wish it or not." Guest. The word was harmless on her tongue, yet it pierced him with a dangerous sweetness. A duke was accustomed to hosts bowing, groveling, kneeling before him. To be reduced to guest was humbling, unsettling, and, most dangerously, humanizing. They climbed the spiral stair to feed the lamp. The tower groaned as wind clawed at its walls, and each step wound tighter the coil of tension between them. Her skirt brushed his knee, the faint scent of sea heather clinging to the fabric. He inhaled without meaning to, surprised by the rush of warmth it stirred within him. From the gallery, the world stretched wild and endless, waves clawing at the rocks with frothing rage. Gulls wheeled overhead like torn scraps of cloud, their cries sharp against the roar. Isella leaned against the railing, hair whipping across her cheek. She spoke not like a servant offering small talk, but like a queen of her own lonely realm. She told him of nights spent alone when her father sailed for supplies, of hours reading by lamplight while the sea whispered secrets only she seemed able to hear. Alaric listened, entranced, though he guarded his own truths carefully. He told her nothing of the treaty balanced on a knife's edge in his homeland, nothing of the counselors who plotted in shadows, nothing of the fiancé chosen for him by bloodlines and politics, not affection. To speak of it would be to break the fragile illusion that this place was apart from the world. A jagged bolt of lightning split the horizon, striking a mast in the distance. Isella's sharp gasp tore him from his thoughts. She clutched his arm, her eyes wide. A ship's in peril. Together they hurried to the signaling post, the storm battering them with spray and wind. She seized the ropes with quick, precise motions, her fingers steady despite the chaos. Alaric followed her lead, raising and lowering the flags as she shouted instructions. The sea roared in defiance, but Isella never wavered, her entire being consumed by the task of guiding the vessel to safety. Through sheets of rain, Alaric caught glimpses of the ship struggling, sails shredded, crew clinging to the rigging. It was her urgency, her fierce command of the storm, that astonished him most. She moved with the grace of one who had already surrendered her life to the sea long ago, and so feared nothing it could take. At last, with their desperate signals flashing through the tempest, the ship limped toward calmer waters. Relief washed over Isella, and she released the ropes with trembling hands. Alaric looked at her then, not as a duke, not as a man weighed by titles, but simply as himself. And he wondered how a lighthouse keeper's daughter, born of solitude and storms, could embody more nobility in a single act than all the jeweled courts he had known. When at last they retreated to the hearth, soaked to the bone, the world beyond the tower seemed an echo. The flames snapped, casting long shadows that danced across the stone. She unbound her hair, shaking loose the braid until it spilled like midnight silk down her back. He could not stop his eyes from tracing the line of her profile, the proud lift of her chin, the way her lips parted in thoughtful silence. "You stare as if you've never seen a woman," she teased, though her voice was softer now, vulnerable in its quiet challenge. "I have," he admitted, his own voice hushed. "But never one carved of wind and flame." The words slipped from him before he could weigh their consequence. Color bloomed in her cheeks, but she did not look away. The storm howled outside, a relentless beast beating at the tower, but inside a different tempest gathered, one they both recognized yet dared not name. Silence stretched between them, taut and shimmering. The firelight painted her eyes gold, and he saw in them both strength and loneliness, like the sea itself. He reached toward the flames, warming his hands, yet all he felt was the nearness of her presence. Isella broke the silence. "The sea teaches us patience. Nothing can be forced. A wave that crashes too soon shatters itself on the rocks." He studied her, struck by the wisdom in her words. "And if the wave waits too long, then it never reaches the shore." The answer hung in the air like a prophecy neither could escape. She rose, smoothing her skirt, and moved toward the stair. "Come," she said, her voice steadier than her pulse betrayed. "The lamp must be tended. It burns only as long as we feed it." He followed her once more, the spiral stair twisting them tighter together. At the summit, with the glass chamber alive in its rotation, he stood close enough to feel the heat of her body, close enough to sense the fragile thread pulling them toward something irrevocable. Isella bent to adjust the mechanism, hair falling across her face. He reached out without thinking, brushing the strand back. She froze, her breath caught. For a moment, time faltered. Then she stepped back, composure reclaiming her. "Storms make fools of us," she said softly, though her eyes betrayed the truth. "Or they strip us of pretense," he countered. Neither moved, yet everything between them shifted, like tectonic plates grinding in silence. The storm continued its long lament outside, but within the tower, the world had narrowed to the space between them, fraught, perilous, intoxicating. Both knew it could not be named, yet neither could deny that it had begun. And when the night deepened, with the waves gnawing at the cliff and the fire burning low, Alaric lay awake in the chamber given him, staring at the stone ceiling. He heard her footsteps above, tending the lamp, and wondered if she, too, lay awake with the same storm raging within. 2 days passed before the roads cleared. The storm had left the cliffs slick and treacherous, the air sharp with salt and the lingering scent of rain. Within the lighthouse the silence felt heavier than the ocean mist, broken only by the steady heartbeat of the great lamp turning in its endless vigil. Alaric sensed the change long before the sound of hooves on stone reached them. The Duke's guards had come at last, their shouts echoing up the stairwell, the clatter of boots and bridles carrying the weight of his other life. Each call was a reminder of the marble halls and arranged marriages waiting like an iron gate to close around him. That night he found her on the gallery, where the lantern swept its circle of gold across the dark Atlantic. The moon hung fractured over the writhing sea, its pale light trembling across the water. She stood at the railing, the wind teasing strands of hair across her cheek, eyes fixed on the endless horizon as if she might hold it with her gaze. "I leave at dawn," he said, the words dragging like an anchor through his throat. She did not turn at once. When she did, her hands remained on the iron rail, white-knuckled against the gusts. "So the Duke returns to his world of ballrooms and crowns," she said softly. "And you remain, watching for ships that may never come." He stepped closer, the cold air between them tightening like a drawn bowstring. Silence stretched, heavy with all the words they could not speak. The lamp above them hummed, casting slow arcs of light that revealed the sheen of unshed tears in her eyes. Alaric felt the old life pressing in, duty, lineage, the treaty his marriage was meant to seal, but here, with her, those obligations seemed distant and ghostly, like a kingdom glimpsed through fog. Isella, he murmured, I have a duty. A name. A kingdom. But when I am near you, those things feel like shadows. Her breath caught, and she shook her head as if to break a spell. You are promised to another, she whispered. The words were firm, yet her voice trembled, betraying the war within. Yes, he admitted. To a woman chosen for me before I understood what love might be. His confession hung in the salt-laden air, daring the night to carry it away. The lantern bathed them in a slow-turning gold. He reached for her, fingers brushing the cool skin of her cheek with the lightest touch. A question formed in the space between them. Tell me to leave, he said, and I will. Tell me to stay and I will defy the world. Her eyes closed, a single tear sliding down like a silver thread. The wind curled around them, tasting of brine and destiny. Her voice came as a breath against the roar of the surf. Stay, in this moment. The world seemed to draw a single, shuddering breath. He tilted her face toward his and their lips met, soft, searching, then certain. It was a quiet collision of salt and fire, a kiss that tasted of the sea itself, vast and inexorable. The ocean raged below as if jealous of their stolen night, waves hurling themselves against the rocks in a thunderous chorus. When they parted, the lighthouse seemed to tilt with the weight of their forbidden desire. Alaric rested his forehead against hers, hearts pounding in a shared rhythm that drowned out the storm. He felt her trembling, the pulse beneath her skin quick and urgent, and knew his own matched it beat for beat. Isella, he whispered, the name a prayer and a plea. She opened her eyes, dark as the depths beyond the reef. We have only tonight, she said, though her fingers lingered against his jaw as if to memorize the shape of him. Tomorrow the sea will take you back. And if I refused? His voice was rough, almost broken. If I sent my guards away and stayed? You would betray your people, she answered, though her resolve wavered in the heat of his nearness. And I would never forgive myself for being the reason a kingdom suffered. He closed his eyes, torn between the life he had been born to and the life he now ached for. The lantern continued its patient rotation, throwing light and shadow across their faces, as if the universe itself bore witness to their quiet torment. They remained there for a long while, leaning into each other, speaking in fragments, stories of childhood, of dreams never dared aloud. He told her of the forests beyond Montrival, where he had once hunted stags beneath a younger sky, of the music his mother played on winter nights when war seemed a distant rumor. She told him of her mother's lullabies, of the years when the sea was her only companion, of the letters she wrote to no one and hid in cracks of stone. The hours slipped like water through open hands. The moon rode higher, then began its slow descent, silver bleeding into the dark. A chill crept over the gallery as dawn approached, pale and inevitable. At last Isella drew back, her face luminous with both sorrow and courage. You must go when the sun rises, she said, though each word cost her. Your guards will not wait forever. He searched her eyes, hoping for a flicker of weakness, a reason to stay. But she stood firm, a daughter of storms and solitude, her will forged by tides that would outlast any kingdom. He felt both humbled and undone. Alaric lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, a vow in silence. I will not forget, he said. Not the sea, not this tower, not you. You will try, she replied gently. The world will demand it. Perhaps, he conceded. But some storms mark a man forever. The first pale line of dawn edged the horizon. Gulls wheeled above the restless surf, their cries thin and wild. Below, the guards' voices carried upward, impatient and commanding. The spell of the night began to fray. Isella reached up, cupping his face with both hands. For a moment they stood suspended between darkness and day, two souls bound by a single heartbeat. She kissed him once more, slow, lingering, a final spark against the coming light. When she pulled away, her eyes shone with a fierce clarity. Go, she whispered. Before I beg you to stay. Alaric hesitated, the taste of salt still on his lips, then turned and descended the spiral stair. Each step felt heavier than the last, the sound of his boots against the stone a measured farewell. At the threshold he paused, the cold air of morning rushing in. Behind him, he felt her presence like a tide he could never escape. Outside, the world waited, the carriage, the guards, the duty that would not yield. He mounted without a word, the leather reins cold in his grasp. As the horses began their climb from the cliff, he glanced back once. High above, the lighthouse still burned, the great lens sweeping a final arc of golden light across the restless sea. In that turning beam he thought he saw her silhouette, steadfast and solitary, aflame against the endless sky. The carriage rolled on, carrying him toward marble halls and whispered alliances, but the storm had carved its mark deep into his heart. No crown, no treaty, no dutiful bride could erase the memory of her touch or the sound of the sea that had bound them for a single, unforgettable night.